Hi, my name is Andrew McLaren, and I want to help you get a 5 on the AP Chemistry test, just like I did about a decade ago. I wasn't the strongest student in my class, but I had a couple techniques that I used that really helped me, and I want to help you out with them as well. So we're going to talk about what I call the components of success, just like all the various things that you need to do, how to efficiently memorize and check that, and then also the timeline of like a year, 3 months, 1 month, and a week out from the AP test, so you know what you should be doing at those different times. Okay? All right, let's dive to it. To get a 5 on the AP chemistry test, you need to know what you don't know, and you need to figure out how to learn that, right? And this is going to take extra work. Now, the AP College Board, they recommend, I think it's 5 extra hours or more each week for AP Chemistry. And if you're not doing that, it's going to be very difficult to get a 5. You may be able to get a 3 or a 4 without doing that, but it's going to be really tricky. This is a very big course. It's difficult to cover all of chemistry in 1 year, and get enough review with it as well. So you're going to need to do a fair amount of review. So the first thing is, I'm assuming you're taking a class. And if you're taking a class, you're going to be making some mistakes in that class. And you should be marking what those mistakes are so you know what they are. Now, if you're learning something brand new and you're making mistakes there, that's not such a big deal. I'm talking more about review problems. So my AP chemistry teacher each period started with a review problem from last week or last month, or maybe even like 3 or 4 months ago. So you got to do those review problems, and if you got them incorrect, you need to review that section. So if you messed up on a stoichiometry problem, you should be reviewing stoichiometry in the next 24 hours, ideally. Definitely within the week. Also kind of depends on how long it's been since you've learned something, right? So then also the next thing that's really important is a study guide or book. You really want one of these like AP chemistry study guides. I think I had a Peterson book. You can also get like Pearson, and there's like a dozen different brands. The main thing with this is that this has extra problems in it that are worked out and explained fully. So if you got them wrong, you can get the correct answer right then and there. So they're structured to help you with certain concepts, and they have these practice tests in there. If you get that one wrong, they'll even direct you to the part where it tells you why that's wrong. So these study guides are pretty good. You could do that during the weekends, which is what I was doing. And so I'd do some review during the weekend, maybe of that previous week or previous month or something like that. Um, I would not work in the book though, because you're probably going to want to look at those pages again and quiz yourself on that stuff again. I would work on a separate piece of paper or a digital notebook or something like that. Something that I wasn't aware of when I was a student taking the test is that they have these practice tests online for free. The College Board, they put the AP Chemistry practice tests up on their website right here. I'm not actually going to go on to it because they can be a little protective with their copyright. But basically, this lets you practice like you're actually taking the test with old test questions. I would highly recommend you do it. It's kind of like when you're scrimmaging for like a game or a sport or something, you want to simulate as close as possible to the test environment. And these questions allow you to do that. So you can like basically look at these free response questions, download them, uh, put away all your notes, mark the ones that you're getting wrong, and work on a different color when you correct it so you kind of know what your mistakes were. And I would also highly recommend, if you go onto this page right here, that you check out the scoring guide and the chief editor notes, because it's important to understand like how they give points and what they don't give points for. Like they don't really give you points unless you get the full answer correct. Occasionally there's some questions that are worth 2 points, and they might give a point for one part earlier and a second part later. For like part E, it might be like 2 points for part E. So you want to understand what they're giving points for and the level of precision that they're looking for so that you're using your time well when you're working on the test, right? So it's not like spending a ton of time just trying to get one more point versus trying to get like 20 more points, that kind of stuff. So you want to understand like these, and it also will help you get more familiar with common misunderstandings because they talk about common misconceptions in there, which will help you catch those yourself as well. So check that out. It's a really good resource that I wish I could show more, but I'm not going to. But if you're curious about the units on the AP test, I'll go into this a little bit more in detail. I've got them laid out on my website, and these are the same units that you'd see in like a study guide or something like that. So you can see the 9 units there. So you got to really make sure that you have a couple, I'd say at least 1 or 2 practice tests done before the test. Most AP chemistry teachers are probably going to have you do one with them anyways. So you might do another one in addition to that from your review book, maybe 2. Some of them have like multiple tests in there. I would honestly do the one from the College Board because it's formatted exactly like what you're going to see. Then to actually fill in some of your gaps of knowledge, you're going to want to really great resources now are online videos like Khan Academy. If you're unfamiliar, Khan Academy has these questions that go with their videos on their site, so you can do that. Or you could see my interactive course that I've been developing. You do have to make an account to be able to access the actual interactive videos, but you can see the site. I've got basically why it's good, which you should definitely check out. There's a number of reasons you want to use these interactive videos. A lot of research-based studies have shown that by engaging with the content, you actually learn better than just passively watching. It makes sense, right? But you can see that I've got the units. I tried to do like Google Slides, but it's kind of small on Podia. But I've also linked it so you can click here and that would take you to like the unit. Or you could click on these individual lessons and get taken to the individual lessons. And these are the units that the AP College Board, they have laid out for the AP test and the percentages for those different units for how many points they're going to be on the test. And I've even labeled with the lessons what topic it's from. So if you've just learned 1.2 or 1.3, those are going to be videos that are going to be relevant that you might want to review after you've learned those things. And so this allows you to, by engaging with it, kind of practice more like you would during like a test or like during a homework assignment, but while you're learning it with the video, which is kind of cool. So if you want to see an example of this, I do need to go to one of these. And I think that I have already made an account. Yeah. So you do have to make an account with this, but it's free. It's totally fine. It's just a free account. And then once you have an account, you can view a couple of these free ones I have, these demos, and purchase the other ones. And they're all $1, so it's very, very reasonably priced. But if you look at this, it's basically a YouTube video with a little bit of stuff on top of it, where you can have the interactive questions, kind of like Nearpod or something like that. So you can have these like multiple choice or free response questions, and I've kind of mixed and matched different ones. And it kind of tells you how you're doing, so you can get like points and see how you're doing at the end of the lesson. It's kind of cool. Yeah, there's like fill in the blanks. So I like it a lot. I also really like study groups. I was in a study group myself for AP chemistry with a friend, and it's really good because if you can explain something to someone else, then you'll understand it better, right? This also builds a sense of community, which can help with the mental health aspects of taking an AP test. This is a very stressful thing. A lot of people are like thinking about careers, like certain colleges they need to get a certain score to get into. This is very stressful, right? So in those stressful times, it helps to see other people and just be around them and be like, hey, I'm going through this too. Have you tried this out? Can I help you? Can you help me? All of that really is important, right? So find that study group. Even if you're the smartest person in the group, that benefits you. because you'll get really good at doing and explaining your thinking. I would also like to re-emphasize, not re-emphasize, but I've said this so many times to people, it feels like I'm re-emphasizing it. You can't cram. You can't do this for the AP test or for the unit tests. If you're cramming for a unit test, you're gonna have to spend all that time again relearning it later. So you don't want to over rely on short-term memorization for these types of tests. You can't do this for like all of chemistry. It's just not practical, and you're gonna be forgetting things just as fast as you're memorizing them. So you got to make sure that if you're trying to memorize something, you got to start on that way in advance. And we'll talk about efficiently memorizing things next. And then also, you got to take care of yourself. Make sure that you're sleeping and eating. I know that before the AP chemistry test, my teacher made breakfast for the whole class that morning, which was kind of cool. So there was, again, a community thing that just kind of got your mind off of it. And make sure that you're taking care of yourself during that test. Like if you're stressed out and you're just like having like an anxiety attack or something, give yourself a minute to breathe, because if you don't, it's just going to get worse, right? So we got to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. We know what to do if we get in that moment and you're like, I've just gotten like 5 problems wrong, none of this is working. What are you going to do to take care of yourself? How are you going to get through that, right? Okay. When you're trying to memorize something, it's incredibly important that you're reviewing at the right moment. When you review is incredibly important, because if you wait too long, you've forgotten, right? If you review too early, it actually doesn't help you out. You have to be in what people call the critical period, where you've learned something, you're starting to forget it, but you still remember it. And this critical period gets further out the more you've reviewed something. So you can consider like these little dots right here and lines to be essentially like when I'm reviewing something, and then the line is when you're not reviewing. And so if you learn something, you really need to review it almost immediately, very, very soon afterwards. And then like maybe the next day you review that concept, and then like a week later you review that concept, then like a month later you review that concept, maybe 3 months later you review that concept, and then like a year later you need to review that concept. So maybe you learned about, I don't know, balancing equations, and you had that down, but then you needed to review how to balance equations like the next day when you came into class, but then you had it down for a little while. Then a week later you start to forget some of the stuff, so on and so forth, right? So maybe you forgot what a mole was, the number for that, because it's been like 4 months since you've done any calculations with a mole. So you need to be making sure that you're reviewing these things at the right time. And to do that, you basically each day need to look at yesterday, last week, last month, and the whole year. And you don't need to spend a whole lot of time on the stuff that's been a long time since you've got it down really well by this point, right? So like each day you're going to be like, if you learned concept A, and then later on you learn concept B, and then later on you learn concept C, like at this moment you're going to need to review concept B and A, and you haven't quite learned C yet, right? But maybe at this moment here, it's like, okay, well, you have A down. You don't really need to look at A anymore. But now it looks like it's about time to review B, and it's about time to review C. So the idea is that you're reviewing just a summary of last week's stuff, a summary of last month's stuff, maybe trying out a couple practice problems to see how you're doing. But your teacher's probably doing that as well. So they probably are doing the same sort of idea where they're going back, looking at some things that you haven't looked at in a very long time, some things that are fairly recent, and some stuff that's very recent. That's at least what they should be doing with those warm-ups. And if they're not, you're going to want to do that yourself. So you're going to want to be quizzing yourself on stuff that you've learned pretty recently and stuff that you've learned a while ago, a little bit less, but you should be reviewing that as well. It's also important to kind of chunk information. This is sorry, you can't really see that right now. Yeah, it's important to kind of chunk out all this information. Like different chapters are related to each other. Like if you have periodic trends and the types of elements, if you can think about like metals and kind of group those in your head together, like non-metals, and group those in your head together, and you kind of know where those are on the periodic table, that helps you know a little bit about the periodic trends, about the conduction of electricity across the periodic table, right? And so you can kind of chunk things into bigger groups. You might also look at like acids and bases and equilibrium. Those are two closely related chapters. Definitely a little bit different because there's equilibrium that's not just acid base, but acid base is very closely related to equilibrium and it's built off of it usually. So if you can chunk and connect things, that will help it kind of lower the load on your brain. So you need to make all these little short lists that when they come together make the big list. So you can chunk information out and try and think about how pieces come together. Because the human brain, you can only like juggle like 5 to 7 things at once, and more than that, and your brain just gets overwhelmed. But if you chunk, you can chunk 5 chunks, and those 5 chunks can contain 4 things in it, and so you can just have a bigger structure if you chunk things out. So make sure you're memorizing at the right time and you're checking things somewhat periodically in those like 5+ hours that you're doing a week, just reviewing yesterday, last week's stuff, last month, what did you do, and the whole year. Maybe do like a problem from each of those categories. The timeline for the year is going to depend a little bit on what your teacher is teaching and when. So I'm going to talk about this generic without talking about individual units. Um, but usually teachers are going to start with some memorization at the beginning because it's kind of essential. There's just too much going on in some problems. You just have to do some memorization or some little tricks. And so you want to get those down so that you can focus on the other parts of the problems later. So you want to get ahead of doing those flashcards and getting familiar with those things. And you also probably should start your study guide. Most of the people don't even look at their study guide until like after December. But if you're doing some of these problems as you're learning these concepts, it will really, really help you in the second half of the year because you'll have them down, right? Kind of like what we were talking about here. It's like, well, if you've only done this many reviews by the time that the test comes around and you didn't review here and you didn't review there, you're gonna have forgotten, right? And if you didn't review pretty recently, you're gonna have to relearn the whole thing halfway out throughout the year. So instead of having to relearn the whole thing halfway throughout the year, just study a little bit of last week's and last month's problems, and you can do that. And you can talk with your teacher, be like, "Hey, what units are we working on? How does that line up with the AP chemistry units?" Because there are 9 official units with the sequence for AP chemistry. So you can talk to them about that, and then you can use that with your study guide to figure out what parts to review from. So if you're early on in the year, you really should just be kind of memorizing and working a little bit on some problems, but make sure you actually do the problems. Don't just look. Like this is crazy to me how many students will they'll just look at like answer keys and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I know that." If you're anything like me, you know that when you look at the answer key, you're like, "Yeah, I understand that," but you may not be able to do the problem on your own. So we want to make sure we can actually do the problems on our own. So don't just look at the answer key, actually do them. Then you're going to want to start quizzing yourself about 3 months out about the chapters. You don't need to do the whole test, but definitely you should quiz yourself on some problems, and then that can tell you, okay, you need to redo this part, you need to redo that part. So don't review like the whole chapter. Just identify the part that you're messing up on and go over that, and then you're good, right? And then also you might want to form study groups. I don't think I formed my study group until about a month out from the test. Um, but it definitely helps to get going earlier on that, right? Then 1 month out, you should have definitely taken at least one AP practice test. Your teacher probably has a final or something like that that's got to be similar, but I would recommend doing more than one just to give you more practice opportunities being in these types of problems. And then you need to mark up which ones you're getting wrong and review those chapters. And then 1 week out, you don't want to be studying. Definitely not the night of. Like I would stop studying like 2 or 3 nights out and just kind of take care of yourself, get exercise, make sure you're getting sleep. If you've been doing these other parts, then you should be good on the memorization, and reviewing something tonight isn't going to help you remember something that you have down for like now like months at a time, right? So I would just relax at that point and take care of yourself. Um, I know that a lot of kids are going to be cramming that week and trying to get you to study with them, but this is when you need to kind of be like, hey, this is me taking care of myself. I'm not going to study anymore on this. um, you got to have some healthy boundaries. So yeah, if you got any questions about that, I wish you the best of luck. Let me know if you need a tutor on AP chemistry or like any science class really. I'll be around. Thank you. Thank you for McLearning with me. I've got a few more offers that I'd like to let you know about. And remember, like and subscribe. For each video on YouTube, I am making an interactive version using HP5. These will be for sale on Podia. And if you click on the link in the video, you should be able to go directly to that product. I also have 2 demos I'm going to be linking so you can kind of see what these products look like. So I would recommend checking out those demos. I also offer one-on-one remote tutoring through Wyzant. Please use the links that I have linked below. That way I can get 100% of the hourly rate as opposed to 75. Each video also has a link for my Patreon, and you can join at the $3 level to get some resources I use for tutoring or to support the channel. And I also have a $5 raffle level, which you could either get some free online tutoring or 5 interactive lessons for free. You choose which ones. And then I also have my Teachers Pay Teachers, which has some old lessons that I made from when I used to be a teacher. I may be adding to that. Thank you for spending your time with me. I hope that you learned something.